"You're useless without a real degree," my parents yelled when I dropped out to learn UX design. 5 years later, I was speaking at Google I/O when they texted, "We're so proud." I sent a screenshot of their old message. "You're dead to us." I grew up in Fairfax, Virginia. My parents, Bryce and Marnie, are the kind of people who believe in plans, structure, and appearances. The classic get your degree, get a job, get married checklist. Deviating from that wasn't just frowned upon, it was unacceptable. I was the firstborn, the one who was going places. I never failed a class. I took AP everything. I even got into George Mason University on a partial scholarship. My major? Business administration. Not because I wanted to, but because it sounded respectable and aligned with their vision of success. For the first year, I played along. I studied, I passed, I smiled. But inside, I was wilting. It was during a group project in sophomore year, ironically, that I stumbled into UX design. We were building a prototype for an app idea. Everyone was focused on data and monetization. I couldn't stop thinking about the interface, the way users would interact with it, the look and feel, the emotional tone of it all. I stayed up until 4 a.m. one night redesigning every screen in Figma. I barely knew how to use the tool, but I was obsessed. When I presented my design, our professor said, "You might be in the wrong major." It was like a switch flipped. After that, I started reading everything I could about user experience design. Articles, case studies, social media threads, you name it. I taught myself the basics of HTML and CSS and started building a small portfolio. It felt like falling in love for the first time, but I knew what it meant. To choose UX meant stepping off the track my parents had laid out for me since I was 8 years old. I tried to compromise. I told them I was thinking of switching majors, that I wanted to study design formally, that it was a growing field with real careers. Bryce looked at me like I'd said I was joining the circus. "You're not going to throw your life away for some art project," he said. "We didn't raise a quitter." Marnie was even colder. She asked, "Do you know how hard we worked to get you here? And you want to design apps?" I tried to explain that UX wasn't just drawing screens, that it involved research, psychology, human behavior, problem solving. They didn't care. All they heard was not business. Eventually, I dropped out. I didn't do it lightly. I was scared. I knew it meant losing their financial support, maybe even their relationship. But staying felt like slowly erasing myself. I packed my things and moved into my friend Nikita's tiny apartment in Silver Spring. It was a one-bedroom, but she let me sleep on the couch. I picked up a waitressing job and did freelance work whenever I could, editing blogs, building small websites, anything to stay afloat. When I told my parents, they didn't yell. They just sent a text. "You're dead to us." I stared at those words for a long time. It didn't even feel real. I was still the same daughter, just finally choosing something that made me feel alive. I never responded. I just saved the message. The next few years were brutal. Learning UX on your own isn't just about tools or principles, it's about navigating a world that doesn't always believe in you. Especially when you don't have a degree, especially when your family cuts you off. I worked long hours, barely slept, and still struggled to make rent. There were times I thought maybe they were right, maybe I had thrown it all away. But I kept going. I found online communities of other self-taught designers. I shared my work, asked for feedback, and rebuilt my portfolio from scratch. Slowly, I started getting better gigs. A small startup in Brooklyn hired me for a contract. I made $1,200 a month and cried the first time I got paid for doing what I loved. In 2020, everything changed. The pandemic turned the tech world inside out. Remote work exploded. Suddenly, no one cared where your degree came from, they cared if you could do the work. And I could. I started freelancing for 2 more companies. My rates went up. My confidence grew. I was able to move into my own studio in Alexandria, Virginia, tiny but mine. Then came the real break. Aurora Scale reached out. They were building a UX team from scratch and wanted someone with fintech experience. I interviewed with them for 6 weeks. When they offered me the job, I sat in silence for a full minute, blinking at the screen. 6 figures. Full benefits. Remote optional. I didn't tell my parents. Not because I was angry, but because, by then, I'd stopped needing their approval to feel proud of myself. When Google I/O invited me to speak about our work at Aurora Scale, I thought they had the wrong person. Me, the dropout, The girl sleeping on Nikita's couch. But it was real. They flew me out to Mountain View. I stayed in a nice hotel, had a green room, a mic, and a bottle of water with my name on it. An hour before my talk, I got a text. "We're so proud of you. Saw your name on the IO site. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't heard from them in 5 years. No apologies, no explanation, just pride now that I have made it. I found the old message. The one that said, "You're dead to us." Took a screenshot. Send it back. Didn't say a word. Then I turned off my phone and walked onto that stage. I spoke about user empathy, about designing systems that treat people like people, not users, about making digital spaces feel welcoming, intuitive, inclusive. I didn't mention the people who made me feel disposable. After the talk, I was flooded with messages from attendees, former colleagues, even strangers online. 1 p.m. told me, "Your story gave me the push to finally switch careers." Another said, "You reminded me why I love design." That night, sitting alone in a restaurant in Mountain View, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted peace. But I still don't know what to do with that message. The one from my parents. Do I respond? Do I let them back in? Part of me wants to ask, "Where were you when I needed you?" But another part wonders if holding on to that silence is just another form of pain. I don't know. What would you do? I didn't reply to their message. Not right away. Not the next day. Not even next week. I kept thinking about what it would even look like to open that door again. It wasn't just about forgiving words or a temporary truce. It was about trust, about memory, about how it felt to be cut off so completely, without even a conversation, just because I took a different road. For a while after the conference, I tried not to think about them. I threw myself into work. My team at Aurora Scale was growing, and I had new designers to mentor. I loved it. Not just the projects, but the process. The team dynamics, the problem-solving, the late-night wireframe sessions, the client calls that turned into full-blown UX therapy. It gave me a sense of purpose I never had before. Still, every time my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, a little part of me braced. It wasn't just my parents I hadn't heard from, it was the whole family. My aunts, uncles, cousins. My younger sister, Hazel, was the only one who hadn't chosen a side, but she'd kept her distance. I never blamed her. She was only 16 back when everything went down, still stuck in that house, still under their thumb. Then, just after New Year's this year, Hazel texted me, "Hey, I'm in DC visiting a friend. Do you want to get coffee?" I stared at that message longer than I care to admit. It was simple. No drama. No mention of mom and dad, just coffee. We met at a small cafe in DuPont Circle. She looked so different, older, obviously, but also calmer. I guess we both did. We hugged, awkward at first, then longer than either of us expected. She was in her second year of med school now. Apparently, she'd gotten out as soon as she turned 18 and applied out of state. She was doing well. Tired, stressed, but happy. She said she'd followed my work for a while quietly, and that seeing my name pop up at IO made her feel really proud. I didn't know what to say. We sat in silence for a bit, sipping our lattes, watching people go by outside. Eventually, she said, "They talk about you more than you think." I didn't answer. She added, "They were wrong. About everything." It took everything in me not to cry right there in the cafe. I didn't know I needed to hear that until I did. I asked if they knew she was meeting me. She shrugged. "Mom's suspects. Dad doesn't ask." Then she said something that's been stuck in my head ever since. "They want to reach out, but I think they're afraid you'll never forgive them. Or worse, that you've moved on and they don't matter anymore." I didn't know how to respond to that either. Because part of it was true. I had moved on. My life was good, peaceful even. And for the first time in a long time, it was also mine. But I'd be lying if I said they didn't matter. If I said their absence hadn't shaped everything. Hazel and I kept talking. We walked around, ended up getting lunch, and stayed out until it got dark. Before we hugged goodbye, she asked if I'd consider coming to dinner, just the four of us. No drama, no expectations. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no, I said I'll think about it. And I have been, for weeks now. I keep playing it out in my head, sitting at their table again, hearing their voices, seeing their faces. What would I even say? Would I scream? Would I cry? Would I be polite and emotionally distant? Would I finally get the apology that little 22-year-old version of me needed? Or would it just open up wounds I worked so hard to close? Some nights, I lie awake and imagine a version of my life where they never sent that message. Where we argued, sure, but they still loved me, still checked in, still believed in me even when they didn't understand me. But that's not the life I had. That's not the story I lived. The truth is, they made their choice. And now I have to make mine. A few weeks after that conversation with Hazel, I found myself sitting on my balcony in Seattle, watching the rain slick down the railings. It was a Sunday evening, the kind that makes you contemplative without asking permission. I'd been dodging the dinner invitation since January. Every time Hazel nudged me, I told her I was traveling or overloaded or just not ready. But something about that night, the quiet, the weather, the stillness of it, broke through my armor. I texted her, "Okay, one dinner, but not at their house." Within the hour, she sent me a reservation at a restaurant in Arlington, upscale, neutral, public. I think we both knew we needed neutral ground. If things went south, I could walk out without the weight of old memories pressing against the walls. I flew in that Friday. Stayed at a hotel in DC alone. The day of the dinner, I worked from my room, made a couple of video calls, then spent an hour getting ready, not overdressed, not casual. Clean lines, polished, like the kind of woman who knows exactly who she is. When I got to the restaurant, Hazel was already there. She smiled when she saw me, a little nervously. I appreciated that she didn't try to overdo it. Just a hug and a thank you for coming. And then they walked in, Bryce and Marnie, my parents. I hadn't seen them in 5 years. My mother looked the same, except thinner, maybe more tired. My father's hair had gone nearly all gray. He was still tall, still had that tight-jawed presence that used to make my stomach clench as a kid. They paused when they saw me. I could see it all flicker across their faces, surprise, discomfort, maybe even fear. I didn't move. Just gave them a nod. We sat, ordered drinks. Hazel did most of the talking at first, stories from med school, neutral topics. I listened, letting the space settle. Finally, my mother leaned forward and said quietly, "Arya, you look wonderful." I raised an eyebrow. "Thank you." Another pause. My father cleared his throat. "I read your interview in Wired about design ethics in fintech. Impressive work." I smiled, thin and tight. "Appreciate that." It was awkward, yes, but it wasn't hostile. They were trying, or at least performing the motions of trying. Eventually, my mom said, "We owe you an apology." I let that hang for a moment. I wanted to hear it. She glanced at my dad, who looked like he was chewing nails, then continued. "We said things that were cruel and unforgivable. I'm sorry for that. I think we both are." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he finally nodded. "We were wrong. We thought we were doing what was best. We didn't understand." I took a breath, not because I forgave them, but because I wanted to speak clearly. "You didn't try to understand," I said. "You didn't just disagree, you cut me off, told me I was dead to you. I built my life from scratch while carrying that, and now that I've made it, you want to pretend it was just a misunderstanding." My voice didn't rise. I wasn't there to shout, but the power in that moment, it hummed through my bones. They both looked down. Hazel looked uncomfortable, but she didn't interrupt. I continued calmly. "I'm not here for closure. I'm here to let you see what you lost. What you gave up." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small hardcover photo book. I'd made it through a custom print service the week before. On the cover, 5 years, no contact. Inside were images of my journey. My first freelance project. The studio apartment. Screenshots from the Aurora Scale dashboard. Speaking at Google I/O, the Wired interview. The UX team I'd built. Messages from mentees thanking me. My current apartment. My dog, and on the very last page, a screenshot of the message, "You're dead to us," side by side with, "We're so proud of you." I handed it to my mother. "You wanted to reconnect. Start with this, read it. Sit with it." She took it with shaking hands. My father didn't reach for it. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said. "And I'm not interested in rebuilding something that never really existed. But I do want you to understand that I didn't just survive without you. I thrived. And I'm not here because I need anything." Then I stood up. Hazel looked at me, half smiling, eyes wide like she was proud and stunned all at once. "I'll see you again, Hazel," I said softly. To my parents, I said nothing more. I walked out of that restaurant taller than I've ever felt. Not angry, not even sad, just free.